Welcome back to the map. We're picking up exactly where we left off at the Human Bridge 3. Sufficiency requires your agency. It requires a burning desire to feel the truth, a relentless questioning of the dogmas of both shores, and the creative courage to build your own meaning. From this virtual academy, I attempt to provide the blueprints and the coordinates, but only you can provide the sufficient reason for the bridge to exist, the will and the courage to inhabit the center of calm over the roiling abyss. But even the strongest will can grow weary in isolation. While the intellect builds the bridge, it is communion that provides the grace, which makes holding the crossing space worthwhile. There is a deep anima yearning within us for connection, resonance, and shared experience. Truth is not just a solitary peak to be climbed, it is also a hearth to be shared by those who have climbed that mountain. We do not cross this middle earth alone. It is my hope that our community will one day become living evidence of the bridge concept in action, an academy where the search for meaning is tended by many hands. Here the structural truth finds its human belonging. We invite you to step out of the solitary cage of reason and into the warmth of our frontier circle of fifths, where your unique human frequency can finally find its harmony. Here's the circle of fifths shown in John Coltrane's Geometry of Music. I have a series of infrequently asked questions here that I'd like to read you. If geometry is a human invention, why does the nautilus shell know the golden ratio? The standard worldview suggests that math is merely a shorthand or a tool invented by humans to describe a chaotic world. However, modern mathematics is beginning to prove what the ancients always knew. We are discovering a pre-existing architecture, not inventing one. Consider the Langlands program, often called the Grand Unified Theory of Mathematics. It has revealed stunning, impossible bridges between completely disparate fields like number theory, harmonic analysis, and geometry. These areas of math, developed centuries apart by different people, are suddenly found to be speaking the same secret language. If math were just a human invention, these deep, elegant connections wouldn't exist. It would be as if two people on opposite sides of the world accidentally wrote the same exact 1,000-page novel. The fact that a nautilus shell, the spiral galaxy, and the Langlands program all converge on the same geometric solutions suggests that geometry is the native language or native tongue of creation. We don't teach the nautilus the golden ratio. The nautilus and the human mind simply recognize the pattern that was already there. Is your map of reality a description of the world or a cage built to keep you safe from its chaos? The Sacred Geometry Academy is not a republic of absolute answers. We avoid the cage of reason by remaining unlikely cartographers, always willing to wander from the path we know to find the truth that is. If we could map every neuron and measure every electrical impulse in the human brain, would we finally know what it is like to be that person? This is the ultimate limit of the catalog of echoes, Aristotle's legacy. It is the brilliant precision of measurement and modern neuroscience, and it's the pinnacle of that. But even a perfect atom-by-atom map of the brain is still just a map of the hardware. It can tell you the quantitative how of a living synapse, but it remains utterly silent on the qualitative what of a felt experience. You can measure the volume and viscosity of a tear, but you cannot measure the grief that shed it. You can map the neurons of a lover, but you can never find the love. This is the third rail of my philosophy, recognizing that the human being is the intersection where the measurable data of the silicon mind meets the immeasurable depth of the eternal soul. To truly know a person, or ourselves, we must move beyond the skeleton of data and step onto the human bridge, where the intelligible patterns of geometry provide the language for the living experience of being. If truth is found in the cold logic of the stars, why does a single line of poetry make the heart feel like a wild bird in the ribs? The standard worldview treats emotion as a subjective flaw, a messy biological byproduct that interferes with pure reason. But as the lyric poet Sappho demonstrated, the singer's fire is not a flaw. It is the forge. In The Incomplete Map, we recognize that the current of truth must be multivalent to be whole. Plato's world of forms is a heaven with no people in it. Aristotle's world of logic is a perfect machine with no ghost. It is only through the qualitative experience of the heart, the visceral, undeniable reality of love, loss, and beauty, that the map becomes the land. We do not just reason the truth, we recognize it because it beats its wings to blood within us. The human bridge is where the intelligible pattern of the cosmos meets the raw intensity of the human soul. The Incomplete Map as a reality atlas for the psyche. In my novel, The Incomplete Map, Book 2 of the Kalian Chronicle, these philosophical schools of thought are not just abstract concepts. They are the living persons that the protagonist, Kale, must relate to and grapple with as he attempts to survive for 5,000 years with his sanity intact. Through his eyes, we relive the clash and eventual synthesis of many world-altering ancient personalities and polarities that speak to us today with so much impact. Here we have a cascade of figures and schools of thought through the ages that Kale relives in this novel. Starting with Sappho, to Socrates, to Plato, to Aristotle, to Alexander the Great, to Ptolemy Soter I, and finally to Hypatia of Alexandria. So here we have 4 different items that I'm going to read you, and these correspond to those symbols that we looked at in the previous video. The Socratic solvent. This was the plow symbol. The trickster as creative disruptor. Moving through it all is the ghost of Socrates. He is the perpetual question mark in a city of exclamation points. His method is the solvent that dissolves the cage of reason, the beautiful but sterile prisons of logic that men build to keep themselves safe from the chaos of the unknown. Socrates famously claimed he had no wisdom of his own to offer, only the ability to act as a midwife for the truth in others. This emptiness and irony are classic trickster traits. He plays the fool to expose the foolishness of the wise. No one is wiser than Socrates, proclaimed the Pythia, Oracle of Delphi. Socrates spent the rest of his life trying to disprove this, eventually concluding that he was only wise because he alone knew that he knew nothing. That was her point. The Platonic pole, the pattern above, the intelligible forms. Remember, this was the golden spiral symbol. Represented by Plato and his ladder of forms, this is the quest for the universal architecture. Kale finds Plato in the serene groves of the Academy, staring at the sun, convinced that the material world is but a flawed shadow of a perfect, intelligible reality. Kale challenges this top-down view, suggesting that the divine pattern isn't just out there in a distant realm, but is a discovered law embedded in the very shape of a geometrically carved stone held in a herder's hand. Here's a quote by Alfred North Whitehead in 1929. The safest general characterization of the European philosophical tradition is that it consists of a series of footnotes to Plato. It's funny, but this was a new view then. For the, couple thousand years before that, Plato was pretty much ignored. It's fascinating that he sort of began a resurgence around then. The Aristotelian pole, the evidence, the focus below in materiality. This is the nautilus shell symbol that we saw before. Represented by Aristotle and his catalogue of echoes, this is the brilliant, pragmatic world of measurement and data. Aristotle looks down at the earth, meticulously mapping the how of the visible world. Kale recognizes the genius of this precision, but exposes its ultimate limit. You can measure the volume of a tear or the voltage of a neuron, but you can never find the grief or the qualia of being through measurement alone. In many Islamic philosophical traditions, Aristotle is known as the first teacher. This title signifies that he was the one who provided the very tools of thought, logic, and categorization that all subsequent scholars used to build their own systems. Thinking back, Aristotle seems to be, in a way, the father of science, or the father of the empirical method, at least. And our civilization has taken a lot from Aristotle and not very much from the others. The Sapphic horizon, and this is my own invention. The symbol here is the lyre. The evidence of the subject, the felt truth, the qualia, the lyre. Represented by Sappho, the 10th muse, on the torch-lit terraces of Lesbos. This is the singer's fire, the visceral, undeniable evidence of truth felt in the heart and in the blood. While the philosophers argue about the concept of love, Sappho transmits the reality of it. She is the 10th muse, the divine source from which we derive the word music, providing that truth is not just a formula to be solved, but a frequency to be felt in the marrow. She provides the missing flesh to the skeleton of logic, proving that the whole of truth must be threefold: clearly reasoned, deeply felt, and fully examined in detail to be whole. There is a famous story that when Solon, Plato's ancestor, heard his nephews sing one of Sappho's songs. Let me just start that over. There is a famous story that when Solon, Plato's ancestor, heard his nephew sing one of Sappho's songs, he asked the boy to teach it to him immediately. When asked why, Solon replied, "So that I may learn it and then die." This is a painting by John William Godward called In the Days of Sappho, and it's from 1904, bridging Victorian academic art and Edwardian elegance. I took the color of her dress here for this sidebar about Sappho. The lost resonance of the lyre. Sappho's poems were originally lyrics in the literal sense, composed to be sung to the accompaniment of an actual lyre. Tragically, none of her original music survived, as ancient Greece lacked a system of musical notation during her lifetime, and no recording technology existed. The vast majority of her poetry is also lost to time. Once collected into 9 volumes at the Library of Alexandria, her work vanished due to the fragility of papyrus and, according to some traditions, intentional destruction by church leaders who deemed her themes immoral. Today, much of what remains is preserved only through the commentary and fragments cited by later writers. Behavior versus orientation. The ancient Greeks generally did not categorize people by orientation, who they were attracted to, but rather by role, active versus passive, or by the specific intensity of their desire. Modern view. We see being a lesbian as a fixed internal identity, a fundamental part of who someone is. Ancient view. Desire was often viewed as a fluid force or a visitation by a god, like Eros or Aphrodite. A woman could feel intense erotic desire for another woman without that desire defining her entire social status or type of person. In later eras, particularly during the rise of Christianity, others invented a husband for her named Cerculus of Andros, which modern scholars have noted is likely a crude joke from an ancient comedy, as the name translates roughly to penis from the Isle of Man. We might now call this an example of the gaslighting of history. The human bridge. Sappho of Lesbos stands as the ultimate human bridge between the divine and the deeply personal. Revered by Plato as the 10th muse and known throughout antiquity simply as the poetess, she transformed the science of rhythm and time into a universal language for the human heart. By inventing the Sapphic meter, she bridged the gap between mathematical structure and emotional expression, transmuting the geometry of time into the immortal, transcendent art of the soul. As the prototypical lesbian of the Western tradition and the greatest lyricist of antiquity, Her legacy defines the archetypal musician, one who maps the middle earth of desire and identity, transmuting private emotion into immortal, transcendent art. These archetypes are not relics, they are living forces. Listen to this singer's fire without prejudice. You will be floored by a Dutch singer, a Finnish band in Germany singing in English. Watch until the end for her climactic sustained D6 and a high E6 in her head voice operatic register, nearly 3 octaves above middle C, just incredible for a soprano. In that liminal moment, you aren't just hearing a note, you're witnessing the visitation of the invisible domain. In that moment, you can feel the visitation by Eros or Aphrodite, who apparently now manifest as a Gothic metal Valkyrie. In that fire and throughout the song, she draws from the same sapphic archetypal stream of the lyric fire, unchanged since the age of the 10th Muse, more than 2,000 years ago. An eternal recurrence of the Muse to light our fires, a vivori. This is the recent archetypal version performed in front of 80,000 people. Now really, if you haven't seen this, it's a long video. I think it's like 10 or 13 minutes. Watch the whole thing. It's really amazing. I've even included some links down here that you can copy and paste if you really want to geek out like I do in doing these reaction videos by opera singers. The synthesis, the human bridge. Cale's journey is his lived realization that none of these maps are complete on their own. The third rail is the flat horizon, where the perfect polarities above and below meet their messy human resolution on the surface of the earth. The incomplete map, Book 2 of the Calean Chronicle, is an invitation to step out of the cages of absolute answers and join Cale as an unlikely cartographer, learning to balance the architect's dividers with the singer's fire and the scientist's scopes, to navigate the map where the invisible becomes visible in the territory of life. So here we have the kind of banner that I have throughout the site. Here's one that says, engage in a sacred anachronism. Draw geometry. Stop consuming the digital world and start constructing an analog one. By returning to the primary language of shape and proportion, you bypass the noise of the standard worldview and rediscover the qualia of your own consciousness. Draw your own map, then color it. So, let's see, we have quite a bit more to go. I think I'll just continue another few minutes here and get to the bottom of the map. Completing the map. Cale squares the circle on the incomplete map with his revelation that what Plato and his student Aristotle's maps were missing was a crucial third path. He recalled spending time with Sappho 100 years before Plato and Aristotle were born, and he realized in the novel something that should have been obvious but truly was not, and still is not, in our cultural DNA. These founding fathers' maps were missing the wisdom of the human heart. Cale knew then that not all cognition happens in the human brain, and especially not just in the male brain. Plato's and Aristotle's ideas went on to form the 2 great pillars of Western civilization, symbolized here by the Sacred Geometry Academy logo. The pillar of Aristotle, a posteriori, empirical data from the after. A posteriori knowledge is derived from sensory experience. It is the realm of empiricism, observation, data, and the engineering of the materials of the measurable physical world. This is where we test the map against the territory by replicable, falsifiable experiment. It is the disciplined scientific study of the manifest world, aka the visible domain, ensuring our philosophy remains grounded in the gravity of quantified detail. On the right, the pillar of Plato, a priori, knowing from the before. A priori knowledge is independent of experience. It is the realm of pure logic, mathematics, and sacred geometry. You don't need to measure a physical circle to know that its circumference to diameter ratio is a transcendental number symbolized by pi. That truth exists in the intelligible before a single circle is ever drawn. It is the eternal blueprint that precedes the world, providing the invisible architecture upon which all of reality is hung. And then the missing piece here, the gateway of Sappho, a vivori, which is a term I coined here, knowing from living in the now. The geometric chakras within the gateway represent the human energy system, the living bridge that the mental architecture is meant to serve. This in-between space is the realm of pathos and beauty, where knowledge is realized in the invisible domain of the heart and the soul. To know a vivori is to understand through experience. It is the third path where the blueprint and the building finally become one in supporting the human family. Here we have the High Priestess Tarot card from the Rider deck shown. And there's a powerful symmetry, if you notice, between this card and the Sacred Geometry Academy logo. The High Priestess Tarot card serves as a mythic mirror to this tripartite division. The Masonic columns of Boaz and Jachin, representing the binary of the manifest world, frame the High Priestess, who sits as the mediator. In Western esotericism, these pillars represent the primordial duality required for the universe to exist. You cannot have a manifest world without the tension between opposites. Boaz, black left column, represents the passive, feminine, dark, it means severity, and the a posteriori, Aristotelian material. Jachin, it's a column on the right, it's white. It represents the active masculine light, it means mercy, and the a priori Platonic impulse. Aligned with the pomegranate veil hung behind her, and it's arrayed in the Kabbalistic tree of life pattern. If you notice these little pomegranate fruits that flank her on either side, and there's one above her head, they're arranged in the tree of life pattern. Where were we? She embodies the third rail and the a vivori experience of the heart, the vital, intuitive element missing from the lopsided head maps of the West. However, we must not mistake the High Priestess or the Sapphic influence as a final destination or a return to a lost matriarchy. These archetypes do not exist in isolation. They function as a tripartite set designed to mirror the fundamental architecture of our minds, our myths, and our governance. The goal is not to replace one pillar with another, but to balance the dynamic tension of the Trinity, the minimum structure multivalent enough to mirror our minds. So I'm going to leave that here now, and I'll see you in the next video.